The bases dropped a little earlier than normal. Soccer Down here, Overreaction Monday for October 21st. Atlanta United advances in the MLS Cup playoffs 1-0 with the lowest scoring game of the weekend, which was not really the expectation coming in on either side of that. But Atlanta wins 1-0. They advance. Second half goal from Franco Escobar. They'll face the Philadelphia Union, who got through in a crazy match in Chester, PA yesterday. Lots of crazy matches all over the MLS Cup playoffs. We'll get into all of those this morning, as well as all of your reactions to Atlanta United, to the rest of the playoffs, to anything else going on, because there's quite a few different things going on today, and we'll try to hit as much of it as we can before we wrap up at 10 a.m. If you guys get this later on the podcast edition, go ahead and tweet your reactions to us. We can save them for a Tuesday Thoughts edition of the show, but we want to hear from everybody with what you thought about the weekend, whether it was in Atlanta, which was a tense match. It was a playoff match. It felt like a playoff match. New England, I thought, played their best match of the 2019 season. But Atlanta had the quality to get through it. I want to get your reactions on the rest of the matches, which at times were chaotic, at times were just freaking crazy. You had caginess at times. You had all sorts of things across the board. And a lot of talk about the playoff format, which one thing that's been kind of funny is I think people are wrong on both sides of it. There's been a lot of talk about, the playoff format isn't any different because we always had knockout rounds since 2011. True, but this time the second seed has to deal with the knockout round, which they haven't in the past. So that adds another level of chaos. And look, both of your second seeds, John, Atlanta 1-0. Seattle had to go to extra time to hold off a Dallas team that I think both of the 7 seeds, who generally would not have been in the playoffs before 2019, both of the 7 seeds really brought it in this format.
Yeah, they counted themselves really well, and honestly, it was a big weekend for it across the board because in each of the games you had subplot carrying it through to a certain point, and then there was the moment, capital T, capital M, trademark circle. And then you end up with the results that you did. There was abject craziness in several of the matches. And it was a fun weekend away from the game that you were divested in and invested in emotionally. So once your match, whatever one that was, got out of the way, it was an enjoyable weekend from the fan perspective for everything else that came across your table.
Yeah, enjoyable is one way to put it. For the neutrals, I think it was very enjoyable. I still think it was stressful. I still think there was lots of stuff going on. Let's hear some of the highlights from Atlanta and New England, and we'll get into your reactions because you guys have had a lot from Saturday and yesterday and this morning as well. We'll get into those in the next segment. But here's what it sounded like from our radio call on 92.9 The Game. It started with a very interesting situation. The Joseph Martinez yellow card for simulation, no penalty call. I mean, ultimately, I'm not that upset about the penalty not being called. It's one that you see called sometimes because there's contact. It's slight contact. There's times that you see that not called. Yeah. That's a judgment call. I'm okay with it. It wasn't egregious. I will definitely say that. It was not egregiously not given. The yellow card felt completely out of place because it was very quick and it felt like a reach. Here's what it sounded like, because when you first saw it, the way that yellow card comes out, you're thinking penalty and yellow to the New England player, in this case the goalkeeper, Matt Turner, who made contact with Joseph Martinez. Here's what the chaos sounded like.
Two-man wall for New England. Now a one-man wall. Gressel pitched to the penalty spot, and Leandro is pushed down in the box. It rolls to Joseph, is clipped down in the box. Penalty and a yellow card.
No, it's not a penalty.
It's simulation on Joseph. It's a simulation yellow on Joseph Martinez. You've got to be kidding me.
That was crazy because we all thought it was going to be a penalty at first.
Yeah.
It looked like it the way everything happened. The other thing that's been very underrated in all of this was Leandro Gonzalez-Perez was just tackled inside the 18 on that at the beginning of it. And it definitely wasn't checked. Well, I don't want to say definitely. I don't think it was because the check was so fast on the Joseph part of it. I'm assuming maybe they were checking the other thing. I don't know, but LGP is just tackled at the beginning of it, and I'd actually forgotten about that part until I watched this back a few times. The yellow card's the only major issue I have with it.
Right. And the fact that apparently Matt Turner wanted to use Joseph's index finger as an appetizer.
No, I don't have an issue with that. No.
I was just playing around.
Yeah, but that's silliness. Like Joseph got in his face,
fine.
and Matt Turner decides to go Iceman from Top Gun.
Yeah,
that's kind of funny.
That was fine. I mean, but the yellow to Joseph for simulation, for me, I agree with you. For me, that was the extreme reaction the other way from what everyone had anticipated might happen. And the refereeing this weekend for me was all over the place. And when you have this first match here kind of leading into the entire weekend, for me, I was stunned like pretty much everybody else in the building that the yellow went the other way.
The refereeing this weekend, it's the playoffs. It's difficult. Was there anything that we feel like the referees affected the outcome of a match?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
I think the Philadelphia game is probably the one that Philly might have had the biggest complaints, but they end up winning, so it ultimately worked out. But outside of that, it's difficult, I mean, my issues with Penso are pretty much the same, except this time he reversed it. This time he swallowed his whistle for the first half and then started calling it very tight, and it got weird. But initially, I mean, he wasn't calling anything.
No.
And I tweeted it. I'm like, when he starts blowing the whistle, it's going to throw everything off kilter in this match because now you start to get used to the line of there not being a foul ever. And then you get back to normal Chris Penso where he likes to blow the whistle a good bit. So it's awkward. That's the one that probably stood out to me from a referee performance perspective, but it's difficult. I think ultimately in the playoffs, if you can get through it and say the referees did not affect the outcome of the match, I'll take it. And I don't think they did in any of the matches this weekend.
So, yeah, I'll take my word and just sit there and go that Penso was the one that stuck out to me, and it was because he was reverse Penso.
Yeah, I mean, it stands out because of that, but there's also, a couple issues in that one. Again, it didn't affect it. Now, it could have, and that would have been a different conversation. Maybe he gets off the hook a little bit, but there were some really questionable things in that one. Let's get back to how Atlanta got through. It was a goal from the playoff hero, Franco Escobar. If we have Open Cup hero, Brandon Vasquez, we have MLS Cup playoff hero, Franco Escobar, and the Joker gets the goal that ultimately is the difference.
Villalba's cross to the back post. Joseph headed away by Farrell. Bounces back to Nagbe. Advances it to Barco. Barco at the top of the 18. Sends it through now to Escobar. His cross. Score! And it's the Joker, the playoff hero from 2018, that breaks through for Atlanta United in the 70th minute. How did he do it?
I thought Escobar was outstanding in general, but the tactical change that happened about 10 minutes before this where Atlanta went to whatever you want to call it. It's a four-man back line. If you want to call it a 4-3-3, if you want to say it looks like a 4-4-2, if you want to go even trickier and say 4-2-3-1, whatever, it's four in the back, and that's the important part of it, because what that did is that freed up Escobar to go forward when he had the opportunity to. It also freed up Florentin Pogba to go forward when that change happened, and that created a few things, although he stayed at home a lot more than Escobar did. But Escobar was good as a center back. He was even better as a right back, and it's ultimately the overload of Escobar and Gressel on the right side, then with Barco dribbling across and beating a couple defenders, that puts DeJuan Jones, who is a converted midfielder playing left back and getting his first start in a while, put him in a really difficult spot, and that was the difference for Atlanta.
And I know that we'll get into this not just today, but for the remainder of the week. But then the relationship that Pogba had with Tito Villalba down the left-hand side, and that caused some problems as well. But having what we saw with MLS Cup playoff hero Franco Escobar going on, it's good first steps to get everything done with that switch there. What about the 60th minute?
Yeah, around that. The other side, it was different. I think it's more Villalba, and it's good passing from Florentin Pogba. He was a little more, I think, defensively secure, and that's the playoffs. That's where you're at in this point of the season. That's where you're at in this game too, which is good to see from Pogba, because at times he's been a guy who will kind of drift and try to go find the game when he needs to hold his position. Maybe only one time that I thought he kind of got caught out, but he was able to recover, and he also had coverage from Nagbe and Lorenowitz to slide over and make up for it. But his long passing, consistently putting the ball over the top to Villalba, what that did, and on the other side as well, what that did is New England then had to actually play a four-man back line with the midfield, without Carlos Heel cheating inside, without the outside backs bombing forward, especially Brandon Bye, because Pogba putting those balls over the top put Bye into foot races with Tito Villalba. That was a really masterstroke on both sides, because it obviously created opportunities and created some situations where New England had to sweat, but it also took them away from some of the things that they were doing well in the attacking side, because they weren't able to do them anymore. So that change, in my mind, ultimately is what led to the win. I think that tactical change was the right call to make.
And now that one's out the door, we get to talk about it today. We get to talk about it tomorrow. We get to talk about it Wednesday. And it's one more day of prep and recovery that Atlanta United gets over their opponent, but we'll get into that a little later.
One thing to keep in mind here, and this is something where we're at, like, just because the tactical change worked in this game doesn't mean it works against Philadelphia. Doesn't mean it's how you start. Doesn't mean it's what you do. It was how you solve this problem. And that's important. That's very, very important, because I think at times we look at this a little too black and white, like, oh, they played well in this shape, just play that shape for the rest of our lives. No. Not even in every game you can't do that. And this was a game that was exactly the case for this. You play in a way that had worked last time you played this team, 2 weeks ago. It's worked for most of the second half of the season. It wasn't working well enough in this match, so you change it up. And you have to be able to do that. And I thought Frank de Boer's comments after the match, where he talked about being able to train in a four-man back line and then go to that when the time was right for it, because that's what the game called for. That's good management. That's good preparation. That's also great from these players to be able to adjust on the fly, because not every team can do that, even if you work on it in the moments where things pick up and the stress picks up, to be able to keep your head, go back to what you've worked on, and change the way you're playing in those moments. Very, very important. And these are the types of moves that can win you championships.
And that's the thing that I think that gets lost a lot about, and when we're talking about playoffs, is that you have an idea going in, and then it's when the opposition adjusts to what you have in mind, then it's those in-game mental challenges that you have. It's chess with one coach going up against another in philosophy, and then coach makes a change. How do you adjust to that? And then getting substitution patterns right and all this kind of stuff, which Frank DeBoer has absolutely nailed this season. I think that there are two instances that I can think of where, when it comes to substitution pattern, Frank DeBoer has gotten it wrong. And it's Monterey and then the confusion in LAFC. That's it. And when you have someone who is adjusting as well as Frank is in game, whether it's tactically or personnel wise, that, it's to see the chess match, knowing that it's coming. It's interesting to see how things lay out, and you have to think about it in this kind of a situation. It's moments and then carrying things forward. It's not just philosophy, locking into a philosophy and then trying to sit there and have that be the push that's going to get you there. It's how you adjust in game to get wins.
The confusion in LA, just to be clear, is about the personnel with the
Right.
Pitti and Barco substitution. The Monterey one was the one where it felt like it was getting away a little bit there at the end after Monterey brought on Pizarro, and the subs were late to hold it to a 1-0 loss and bring it back home in the second leg, or even hold it to a 2-0 at that point. They were a little late. That's also early in the season as you're getting to know this group, and it's a mistake that hasn't been repeated, which is good. But that's a huge difference in contrast to what we saw on Saturday, because it wasn't anything late. It was actually very proactive. A lot of times we see Frank make adjustments based off what the other team does. This time he goes with a double change early that turned the game on its head, and it was the right move at the right time to open this game up. I think Frank DeBoer had a very good day with that. Now, one thing that a lot of questions have come up, and they'll continue to come up, is Pitti Martinez. And Pitti Martinez did not see the field for the second straight match against New England. The explanation afterwards was that he's fit, he's ready to go. It's the decision that I made, and that's where you're at right now. It's a bold move, and as that game was rolling on with no goals in it, you had to be wondering, is this going to be the move that limits the attack and you don't get enough and you don't get the goals that you need? It wasn't, and the defense held up, which was a huge part of this. But I'm curious to see where this goes in the next match against Philadelphia, a team that you've seen twice. You know how they play. It's going to be a 4-4-2 diamond to start if they hold true to the way they've played, and then change to a 4-2-3-1 in around the 60th minute, because that's when Ilsinho comes in. Now, you do have some questions about Philadelphia. Alejandro Bedoya had to leave with a quad injury that he's been dealing with for a while now, and it just finally got to a point that he couldn't continue in stoppage time, or in extra time, sorry. So what's his availability going to be? Kasper Shabilko doesn't really affect the tactics on the Atlanta side too much. It's just a different personality up top. We saw Andrew Wooten and Sergio Santos start up top for Philadelphia. Shabilko makes it a little different, but I think they'll stick with that duo to start with, unless they just get really creative and go with Ilsinho to start. What does that mean for the inclusion of a Pitti Martinez against the Philadelphia team that does like to press, that they do like to get out on you and make life difficult for you? They weren't really able to do that a ton against the Red Bulls because of the way the game played out. But I'm probably the most fascinated by that, combined with the injury to Michael Parkhurst, the expected absence of Miles Robinson due to his hamstring injury, and what the back line looks like and how that could affect the rest of the personnel for Atlanta. The lineup is going to be, highly. It's very interesting to see what options Frank DeBoer goes with, because he has options, and that's the thing that I want to, make clear here, is that it's not that you don't have options with the injuries to Parkhurst and Robinson. You do. You can still play 3 in the back. You can play 4 in the back. You can go a lot of different directions, but Which one do you choose at this point could affect the outcome on Thursday night.
Yeah, and looking at the early ideas on the timeline, that's what a lot of folks are focused on right now with the questions that you raised when it comes to who may not be around for Philly, who probably will not be around for Atlanta United. And this is the chess of the postseason. And you're talking about quick turnaround for both and, you know, little niggles here and there, little injuries here and there that you've got to just kind of push through. But the strategy with the personnel, who you have, who you may not have, and who you don't have is part of all of this that we're going to be paying attention to.
We're going to take a quick break. Tweet your reactions to us on Twitter at @SoccerDownHere. Use the Overreaction Monday hashtag. We'll get to those right after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down here, October 21st. It's an Overreaction Monday. Atlanta United 1, New England Revolution 0. Atlanta moves on to the Eastern Conference semifinals to face the Philadelphia Union on Thursday. Kickoff will be after 8 o'clock, probably not too long after 8 o'clock. It's a doubleheader setup with El Tráfico in the postseason from L.A., which is going to be nuts. That game will be right after Atlanta and Philadelphia. So I'm guessing kickoff won't be past 8:15 for those of you who are making those plans and setting alarms for when the actual kickoff happens, because it's rarely at the exact time. It's never at the exact time, I think, except for Open Cup, maybe. Won't be too bad, though. I think it's about 8:15 or so. We'll keep you updated as soon as we know. But how did we get there? What did people think about the journey to get there? What are the reactions to the weekend that was, John? Let us know what's on the Twitter timeline.
We have plenty. And the first question we kind of got into a little bit in the first segment, Caleb Cook wondering if Philly will adjust to Atlanta or Atlanta to Philly.
I don't know if either team really has the options to adjust a whole lot. That's the problem, is both teams with injury issues, that limits your ability to adjust to the other in terms of coming into the match. Now, in the match, look, Philadelphia, it's pretty consistent that they go 4-4-2, then they go 4-2-3-1 when they bring on Ilsinho around the 60th minute. That's been their MO most of the season. It's worked most of the season. I'm not expecting them to go away from it unless the Bedoya injury forces their hand. I don't think it should, because you can drop in Warren Creavalle into that midfield in Bedoya's place, and yeah, it changes the personality a bit, but you look at their starting lineup, back line I would expect will be the same: Kai Wagner, Mark McKenzie, Elliott, Gaddis. That's been pretty consistent. I'm not expecting any changes. Wagner had a couple different knocks, was hobbling at different times. I think he'll be fine. Midfield diamond was Medunjanin at the base, Bedoya and Montero on either side, and Aronson as the number 10. When Ilsinho came on for Andrew Wooten up top and made it the 4-2-3-1, Aronson went over to the left, Ilsinho came on to the right side, and Sergio Santos was your forward up top. Now then you started to get changes from there. The 4-4-2 going to 4-2-3-1, I don't see how Philadelphia can get away from it unless they decide that, all right, Warren Creavalle for Bedoya changes the way we want to play this, so we're going to start with Santos up top by himself, because Wooten only started 5 times for Philadelphia, including yesterday. You start Santos by himself, assuming Shabilko's not available. Ilsinho on the right, Fafa Pico on the left, Montero as the number 10, and Creavalle and Medunjanin sitting behind. That would be the other solution for Philadelphia. What that would do is give them more width. It's the one knock on the 4-4-2 diamond is you don't have a ton of width. Gaddis and Wagner can push forward and cause problems, but are they dangerous going forward? I don't know if I'd go there. So if you want more width, you want to go 4-2-3-1 to start. Can you get what you want out of Ilsinho in a starting role, knowing that you could potentially go 120? I don't know. It's a big risk. It would be a huge risk for Jim Curtin to do that. Ilsinho started 6 times, I believe, this season. Maybe. I mean, on the Atlanta side, then you get down to the question. And this is why I think it's so hard to even get into before the game who's going to adjust to the opponent, because you have to figure out what's going to be your best way to play with the injuries you're dealing with, number one. And on the Atlanta side, you could go into this, and I'd say likely will, without Michael Parkhurst, without Miles Robinson. That means you've got to make some decisions about how your center back situation is structured. Do you go 3? If you go 3, how do you make that work? Is it Escobar, LGP, Pogba? Is it Lorenowitz, LGP, Pogba? Is it Lorenowitz in the middle? Is it Escobar on the right side of the 3, or do you want him as a wing back? I mean, do you go 4? And then Escobar's a right back, and then LGP and either Lorenowitz or Pogba. And then who's on the left side? Is it Pogba? Is it Mikey Ambrose, who's healthy and has been playing for Atlanta United too? I don't know. And there's not an easy answer here. And no matter what happens, you're going to get people who second guess it, and that's okay. That's where you're at this time of year. But there's not an obvious solution for Atlanta United. And don't let anybody tell you that there is. There's not, because you haven't been in this situation. You've had one game all season that you didn't start with Parkhurst or Robinson. And LGP played in the middle of a 3-back there against Club America. Is that the way you go, 3 in the back, because that's how you've played the most here lately? Or do you feel like maybe you hit on something with 4 and allowing Franco Escobar to be one who goes forward? Now, one thing that I did notice when they went to 4, it took Julian Gressel a little bit of time, I think, to figure out the spacing a bit, because it's a very different role for him. When you're a wing back versus a right winger in 4-3-3, the way it played out, everything's different. And then you're dealing with somebody overlapping you when you're normally the person who is bombing forward. So you have to think about coming inside for that and creating that spacing and your movement and where you're positioned. You will have some time to work on it, but now that you know who the opponent is, and now that you know pretty much how they play, I mean, they have two different shapes that they're going to come in, and usually they go from one to the other. Do they start in the 4-2-3-1 this time? That's probably your biggest question. Hasn't happened very much, but they've done it. What's the decision going to be about the back line? And is there any hope that you might get either one of Parkhurst or Robinson? It didn't look good, and I know something that was said that without knowing the actual injury, I think it's maybe jumping a little bit to a conclusion here. Michael Parkhurst wasn't diagnosed when he left the stadium and went to the hospital. So Frank DeBoer said in the media availability after the match that when those things have happened with a dislocated shoulder and they couldn't get it back into place immediately, that it's typically around 2 weeks minimum. But we don't know exactly what it was. So do keep that in mind. I don't expect to see him starting on Thursday. I don't expect to see Miles Robinson. I think you're going to have to figure out some other solution. And you don't want to be in that situation in the playoffs, but how often do you see it in any sport where you get to these moments and somebody goes down and it's next man up?
Yeah.
Sometimes heroes are created from that. Sometimes frailties are exposed from that. You never know, but I think that's the situation you're facing if you're Atlanta United.
Senor Octubre. We have to figure out who that is this year. Early returns, Franco Escobar. Cuppers, Alex has had a busy morning, and he's had thoughts / reactions and some overreactions. I'm going to combine one of them here.
Okay.
He says, Barco was great, and his actual overreaction Monday, is there any ref willing to stop the hack the crap out of Atlanta, especially Barco tactic? And does anyone know the definition of persistent infringement?
I think very few know the definition of persistent infringement, or it's just defined very differently according to different people. He was fouled 5 times, and it still feels like there were at least 2 or 3 more that weren't called, and yellow cards weren't given where they should have been, in my opinion, earlier in the match, because it became an obvious tactic that Atlanta gets into transition foul. And not just Barco, but Barco was the one who was leading the transition so many times. Look, I get the frustration that some people have at times that, Barco goes down easily. And he went down a few times trying to get a call in this match. Yes, it's part of the game. It's what you're supposed to do, especially when you are getting hit. Were all of them fouls? No. Contact's allowed. That's okay. There can be some contact sometimes, but I think Ezequiel Barco consistently puts defenders in a bad spot. When you're completing 4 successful dribbles, doing all of the things that Barco does in a match, you're going to create situations where defenders have to lunge in or have to grab or have to kick. And you're going to earn fouls. What I hope is that you continue to see this evolve. It felt like last year Barco got no calls. This year he gets calls, but he creates so many situations where you're creating the opportunity for a foul that even in this one where 5 were called, it still feels like there were more left on the table. The next jump in the way that I think he's called and players like him are called is that you see that persistent infringement come up earlier, because that will open games up more. It's necessary.
Alex's other thoughts we've kind of talked about this morning, and we'll get into his last thought in hour number 2. He says it was a great first weekend of MLS playoffs. Then he said mostly thoughts, but I can overreact about the Falcons. So that's where Alex is right now. Shiva, I'm going to overreact about Joseph. I love him to death, but yesterday I didn't see Joseph on the pitch. His energy and fight wasn't there. I've noticed games like that from him through the season. I just wasn't expecting it yesterday.
No, I disagree, Shiva. I have to completely disagree with that. Joseph was very demonstrative throughout the day. Joseph didn't get a ton of service because New England defended well, so that happens sometimes. Joseph is also not one who runs around like crazy and runs himself out and tires himself out. Can't do that when you're the forward. I saw people talking about Zlatan Ibrahimovic last night. Like, well, Zlatan looked like he didn't want to play. He wanted to play. He wanted to win. He's not trying to go on vacation already. That's not how these guys function. That's not how they work. Just running around isn't always the best option. It's not always the smartest option. You want to be sharpest in the moments where it comes from. Now, if you want to talk about Joseph from Saturday, he had a couple chances that normally you see him put away, and he didn't. And that happens. That's the life of a goal scorer. The thing about Joseph that you have to love is that he pushes that away pretty fast, and it's not going to affect him going into Thursday. Doesn't guarantee that he scores a hat trick on Thursday, but I don't think he's going to be in his own head about not burying chances against New England. I thought Joseph was very locked in from the jump here because he wanted certain types of service. When he didn't get it, he was demonstrative about it. I thought Joseph was Joseph. He just didn't finish like he usually does. I think sometimes we judge a player's attitude or a player's mindset in how much they're running, and that's not the case. I think the smartest players, honestly, in a lot of ways, run the least because they are, one, like properly positioned to begin with, so they don't have to sprint to get into position, and two, they're not just wasting energy in running around to make it look like they're doing something. I don't think you have to do that. And I don't really want that from Joseph. I want him to be in the positions that he's in, look for the service that he generally gets, and bury his chances. That's what you want to see from him.
You have to almost think of it like it's going to be 120 minutes, and you manage where you're going to be, you manage what you're going to do, and
also that's a good point.
And you sit there and you're trying to figure out, okay, where do I need to be? And it's about, I guess, the economy of effort, I guess what I'm trying to figure out, the phraseology here. It's like there are times when I know I need to turn it on. I know I need to be at 110%. And yes, I know that you can only be at 100%, but there are times when you need to max it out. There are times when you don't. It's just about managing where you are in the moment, where you are in the particular run of play, and trying to just sit there and be present in where you are for the entire time. You don't have to have the pedal down the entire time. Sometimes you can just, coast and have the foot off the gas and not use the brakes. So it's just how you run the car over the full time.
The thing is, there are some players who the only way they can contribute is to run around like a lunatic. I know a lot of people got very excited and honestly changed their opinions about Ezequiel Barco because last year in the postseason, he ran around like crazy when he came in. Well, that was his role. When he came in, it was give energy. It was chase things down. It was grind the game out. It was go hustle. It was go chase this. Ezequiel Barco is not a player that you want running around chasing a whole bunch of stuff because you want him as sharpest when he's on the ball. You want his energy used there. Same for Joseph. When the best players, you don't want them being less effective because they ran themselves into the ground for no good reason. Right. And Joseph is one of those players. So in terms of being locked in and being Joseph, I thought he was that. I thought he was absolutely that. I don't honestly know, outside of him not being as effective in front of goal, I don't know what else happened that would make you think that he wasn't, outside of conserving energy. And I think some of that's down to the playoffs in 120 minutes potentially, and also just the fact that the game didn't really call for it either. I mean, it's not like New England was building up out of the back on any regular basis for him to go chase and press. They were playing long for the most part. So, when Atlanta is defending, there's really nothing for Joseph to do. He wants to be in the positions to be able to go forward with that service. So I didn't really notice that from Shiva's comment. I just didn't really get that sense. I thought he was, if anything, as demanding as ever in terms of wanting service in certain parts of the field.
James McClatchy, am I the only one who thinks that neither the Galaxy nor Minnesota United looked as good as the Revs did on Saturday?
I don't know of many teams that looked as good as the Revs did on Saturday, and Dallas for that matter. When you look at the 7 seeds combined, I thought both showed a lot in this. Minnesota looked nervous. Minnesota played like it was their first playoff game, which it was. The Galaxy, I think, did about what they can do. They're limited just because they don't have a strong defense. They played 4 center backs, which affects the way you play. They still gave up a bunch of chances. Minnesota should have won that match. I disagree. The Galaxy were great. I don't think they were. Now, what gets weird is the Galaxy, for some reason, get up even more for their games with LAFC and become world beaters. And LAFC, it's in their head that they're facing the Galaxy, and they don't play the way they should. So that could be very different in the LA Galaxy side of things on Thursday night. Minnesota just wasn't good enough. They had the opportunities. They should have won it. They didn't get the chances put away. They created so many more chances. They just were not good enough, flat out. The rest of the playoffs, you look at some of the other performances, I don't think Toronto and DC, either one was all that great. I don't think either one was better than New England. The scoreline makes you think Toronto was great, but once they got the go-ahead in extra time, DC was done. They were cooked. So the 3 additional ones I don't think really showed much.
Caleb Wright, should Atlanta make it to MLS Cup, he's hopeful they won't have to play LAFC, which is hopefully a little more likely with the Galaxy. His prediction for the winner of the Galaxy-Minnesota match now playing LAFC. So Caleb is wrapped up in El Tráfico already.
If you're worried about Atlanta United, worry about Atlanta United first. I mean, whoever they play, they'll play, but they got to get there. And you can't worry too much about what's going on the other side of the bracket. If LAFC gets there, well, they should. They've been the best team in the league all season. They should be hosting MLS Cup, but they got to earn it. They got to win it. They got to get to that point. Nothing you can do to affect it because in the East, according to the regular season, it should be New York City. And you're going to have to go beat them in their building if they beat Toronto, if you win too. Because you can't look ahead. You can't even worry about it because Philadelphia is right there with everybody else. They have been all season. They lost 3 of their last 4 at the end. They showed up huge yesterday and showed a lot of grit. They're not going to make it easy for Atlanta on Thursday night. So, I mean, it's fun to start, well, if then this, and if this happens, then we'll get to do this, and then maybe, and then from the Atlanta side of things, it is all focus on Philadelphia and taking care of business. And I think from the fan perspective, it's come into this and if you're coming into the building, make as much noise as possible. I think the pressure and the intensity of the situation at times, I think it had everybody worried. It felt very tense at times. It felt like the goal was this huge release of just built-up tension. Let it all out in this game, and because there's a very good chance this is the last game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium this season. You'll know going in if that's possible or not because you'll have the result from Wednesday of NYC and Toronto. But if NYC wins and Atlanta, advances, then you're on the road. And if LAFC is in MLS Cup, you're on the road if you get there. So this is it. I hope it is less nervous and more raucous in the building. I get the nerves. I understand it. But this is a team that I think you can trust. And you can really try to push as much as possible with as much noise as possible and as much support as possible. It does have an effect. I think the last 15 minutes or so after the goal, it definitely had an effect.
Stizzle, who I think full name on Twitter is Stizzle A, at Stizzle A. Escobar was great, but Goose was exactly what a championship keeper needs to be. He still has it. Hashtag overreaction Monday.
100%. Absolutely 100%. Brad Kazan was huge, and he made a huge save early on the one situation where you looked at it building up and you're like, oh, man, I wish we had Miles Robinson here because it's a 2v1 completely misplayed by Leandro Gonzalez-Perez.
Yep.
It's a fluky situation because it's an Atlanta corner, and Andrew Farrell lunges in front and clears it with his right foot, and he's just clearing it wherever he can clear it. And it goes straight up the field, and I don't know if it's the spin or what, but Leandro's charging in to win it, and it skips over him. with the bounce. He just completely misread it, and that created the 2v1 on Parkhurst, who defended it so well to hold it up, but then it still fell because that's the situation. Like, you can do everything right, and it still falls to Christian Pena at the top of the 18, and he gets the shot off that's going to beat most goalkeepers. But Brad Kazan makes the massive save to keep it scoreless.
J.C. Hillis mentions the discussion that we had earlier on about shifting to the 4-4-2, sparking life in the attack, releasing Escobar. He says, what do you think FDB will have up his sleeve for Philly?
That's what, again, as we talked about with lineup stuff, that's where it gets hard because your sleeve doesn't have as much stuff up it now.
Short sleeves.
Yeah, something like that. You're going to have to figure out what you're going to do to start with. I don't know how many options you're going to have on the bench outside of changing personnel. Now, if you start in a 3, you could go to a 4. Obviously, if you start in a 4, you could go to a 3. Those are definite possibilities. It's a tricky situation. I called it a 4-4-2 when it changed because I looked at it as you were matching what New England was doing. Barco was dropping in behind, which you can call that a 4-3-3 if you want, with Villalba on the left and Gressel on the right. And that's what Frank de Boer called it. I think the biggest change from me out of it was the 4 in the back, because that opened up the possibility for Escobar and Pogba to advance when the time called for it. Do you start in that type of situation? You could. You did really well in the 4-3-3, to be honest, this season. So you could go there. I don't know. I honestly don't know. And I think more than anything, it's going to be about which grouping gives you the most comfort. Is it 3 and which 3? Is it 4 and which 4? I think at this point, if you're Atlanta United, you're picking the grouping that makes you feel the best as opposed to looking at what Philadelphia does. I just don't think you have the luxury of doing that. No, not with the injuries you have. I think you would rather, if the best trio defensively is Lorenowitz, Escobar, LGP, you play it, and you make everything else work from there. If it's Pogba, Escobar, LGP, then you play that. It's whatever grouping makes you feel the best, and whatever trio or duo in the center makes you feel the best. That's what you have to go with. You can't even think about the Union in that regard. You do that, and then you make the pieces fit around it, and that's how you affect the Union. I don't think the Union are going to make the decision about 4-4-2 or 4-2-3-1 based off Atlanta unless they feel like, and I don't even know which one makes this play out, but unless they feel like, all right, well, now Atlanta's really going to be struggling defensively, let's go for it early, and let's really put the pressure on them. I guess maybe Fafa Pico gets the start in that regard, just to have more speed, but they press in the 4-4-2 anyway. So, I mean, it's not like they have to make some change to be able to play a certain way. They can be aggressive in any shape. That's the trickiness of this. But from Atlanta, I just don't think you can worry about it. I don't think you have enough solutions to worry about it. You have to figure out what gives you the best chance to be the most secure. And that's where it starts. I think a lot of people... Look, I was shocked that more lower seeds didn't come in defensively in this knockout round, this first knockout round. I was shocked. It's normally what you see. New England wasn't really defensive, but they were conservative. Dallas, I think giving up early goals kind of took you away from anything possible at that point. So they didn't really have a whole lot of options to sit back and be conservative after you're down 2-0. Toronto and D.C. was fairly conservative. D.C. just wasn't good enough, and they couldn't get it done. The games yesterday, Philadelphia and Red Bulls, neither one's going to come in conservative. That's just who the Red Bulls are. And the one last night, the Galaxy, they are what they are. I mean, they're just not good defensively. They had 4 center backs. I guess you could say that's conservative, although they didn't necessarily act like 4 center backs because that's the Galaxy this season. But I expected lower scoring games. I think you're going to start to see lower scoring games. I don't think every playoff game is going to be wild and crazy like we've seen so far. That's why I'm still holding to the opinion. I know I'm in the minority on it, that I don't love the playoff format. And I think you're going to see it play out here very soon, because you're going to get games at this point now that would be over 2 legs. You're just going to get 1, and it's going to be very different. So I don't know. I might be wrong in that. We'll have to see over time, but I think it changes the way the games play out and creates more chaos now at this point. We've had knockouts before. 7 had the number 2 seeds in them. But now you're going to get more chaos at this point. Does Philadelphia come in and say, well, we don't have Alejandro Bedoya. We want to stretch this game as long as we can? They could. I don't know if it suits their personality, but they could. The Galaxy going into Bank of California, could they do that? I think they'd like to. I don't know if they actually can implement it. Just not sure about that. Toronto going into Yankee Stadium, yep, I can absolutely see Toronto doing that. And Seattle and RSL, maybe. RSL might be able to do that. They're young. I don't think it matches their personality as a team too much, but maybe. And they'd probably be smart to sit back and defend on the counter, because I think they could really catch Seattle. I just don't know if they can execute it the way they'd like.
Chris Ashley is in the queue this morning. Actually, let me go back a step. FC Waffle's apparently listening to us on the West Coast, so a very happy early morning, Waffle.
Hola, Waffle. Get some waffles.
Yeah, really? And I'm going to save Chris Ashley until hour number 2, because that's kind of news and notes-ish. It goes into everything else that's not Atlanta United and MLS. Nathan Pugh. Subs won the match. The first half was stale. I would argue to have Tito on the pitch starting to at least provide something different. And I know Barco gets hacked a lot, but my goodness, I want him to do more of trying to play the ball instead of trying to play for the foul.
See, I disagree. I mean, I don't think anything he did in trying to play for the foul caused a problem here. I don't know. It's different. It's different mentalities of the game and different ways you look at the game. There's always been the idea that playing for the foul is either weak or you're diving or you're making things up. I don't think Barco in this case, and I'd have to go back and slow-mo everything and look at it, I don't think he completely made anything up as a true dive. I think there was contact on him all day long. I mean, 5 fouls.
Yeah.
That happened. And a few more times that he went down and didn't get a call. And there were a couple of them that I thought he should have got the call. There were a couple of them I thought he went down easy, and it's a judgment call. And that's more of the situation. I think we always jump to this, well, it's a dive or it's not a dive, or he's not playing or he is playing. It's like, no, it's a judgment call. And not all contact results in a foul. And if you're an attacking player, you want to force the referee to make the decision that you're looking for. And how many times have you seen it where a player gets bumped, gets hit, stays on their feet, but bobbles and then loses possession? It happens all the time. So you got to do what it takes for your team to win. Now, I never like when a player is not touched and goes down easily. But when there's contact, you got to force the referee to make a decision. And that's just part of the game. And that's no matter what country you're in. I mean, how many times do we see it where, the English media gets really worked up about Latin American diving?
Yeah.
But then you watch English players dive just as much.
Oh,
more.
And they're not even good at it sometimes.
Yeah, it's just part of the game. It happens.
Well, and then what you're doing, early on is you're gauging how a ref is going to be calling a match. And then that way you can sit there and either, if you're going to try to get a call, if you get the call, then you're going to continue to try to push the envelope and push the edge. So, no, I completely understand why it's being done.
It's part of the game. I mean, ultimately, it's being done to try to get a call. And when you get a call, you're either getting a penalty, or you're getting a free kick, or you're getting a card on a player. It's part of the game. Referees have to handle it. That's maybe my biggest issue with the yellow for Joseph, is that referees very rarely throw a yellow in that situation. And this time, there was a decision to be made. But so often you see nothing given there when it is a complete dive. This one felt very quick, very sudden, and just out of place. So you just want consistency. It's very difficult. It's all the stuff we talk about when it comes to referees, and that you got one referee covering the whole field. He's got some help from the ARs. He's now got help from headsets and a VAR, but there's so many situations that he's got to make a snap judgment. Players are going to be trying to take advantage of the fact that he can't be everywhere at all times. It is a part of the game.
Daniel Price uses the word zany. He goes, what a zany weekend around MLS playoffs. Every game had him on the edge of his seat. Philly's going to feel that game for a while. They looked exhausted.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. It was a heavy field. It was a wet field. You had to put everything into it to fight back to get to extra time. I mean, you were down 3-1. You were down 2-0 and 3-1. And you come back and you get it to extra time, and then you find a way to get the lead and then hold the Red Bulls off. Bedoya was playing basically on one leg and brains for most of the second half. I don't know if he's going to be ready to go, and if he is, he's going to be limited. The rest of that group, you had a lot of guys put in a lot of minutes. Wagner up and down the left wing and consistently hobbling at different times as he took different kicks. Is he going to be ready to go? I thought McKenzie put in a lot of work. He was very shaky at times, but got better as the game went on. Andre Blake was, you wondered, not so much from a physical aspect, but a mental aspect. Where's he going to be at after just an awful first half?
Yeah.
It's just a game that they played 120. They had to fight for it more. Atlanta played 90, and Atlanta was in control more of that match and didn't have to run themselves into the ground in the same way. That's a huge advantage. It's a huge advantage. This time of year, if you can put games away early, or if you can just not have the same stress where you have to fight back, you're going to be in a better position the next game out. So that's a huge advantage for Atlanta United. You get the extra day, and you just didn't have to put in as much work. So you're in a really good spot if you're Frank de Boer from that perspective. Of course, that's mitigated with the fact that you don't know who you're going to play in the back. You don't know what you're going to play in the back. You don't know what it's going to look like because of the injuries to Miles Robinson and now Michael Parkhurst. We'll get into more of your overreactions on a Monday in hour number 2, which will start here in just a bit. We'll also cover the rest of the games from the playoffs. We'll talk about the NWSL as well. Their final is coming up after the semifinals this weekend. 2 good crowds for the semifinals. USL League One has a champion. We'll talk about that. We'll get into the news and notes from around the country as well. Hang out with us. We'll be right back after this.
A ranger station.
I'd like to report a bear hug.
Okay.
I put out my campfire and Smokey Bear hugged me.
So you drowned the fire, you stirred it, drowned it again, and felt that it was cold?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he's just letting you know you did good.
Bear hug from Smokey Bear. Status update.
I'm gonna let you go now. There are many ways to start a fire, but one sure way to put it out. Learn how you can do your part at SmokeyBear.com.
Sponsored by the U.S. Forest Service, Ad Council, and your state forester.
As a business owner, you know that every year brings new challenges and opportunities. The success of your business demands expertise and focus. And Country Financial can help you keep that focus by helping ensure you have the right insurance protection in place to meet your goals. Jason Wright can help you create a customized insurance plan that has coverages designed just for your business. Give Jason a call at 678-568-6871 or reach him on Facebook at Jason Wright Agency. Coverages vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
This is what matters. This is beyond X's and O's. This is the difference mutual respect makes. This is what character looks like. This is what defines us in Georgia. This is sportsmanship. School sports. It's not the outcome that matters most, but the way the games are played. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
If you've been hurt in a car wreck, contact my friend Steve Apolinski of Apolinski and Associates. He's been representing individuals for over 30 years throughout Georgia and Alabama. Email him at steve@aa-legal.com or call him 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
You're listening to Soccer Down Here daily on SDH Networks, a division of OSG Sports. Find us at Soccer Down Here on Facebook and Twitter. The time is now the top of the hour. Peep, y'all.
Welcome back. Hour number 2, SDH. Slightly earlier edition today on an Overreaction Monday. So if you miss out and you're listening on the podcast version, still go ahead and tweet at us with your overreactions. We'll get into them tomorrow. You can turn them into Tuesday thoughts. That's all good. Tomorrow, Soccer Over There will be live from the Brewhouse Cafe. Not tonight, because it is leg 2 of the Copa Libertadores semifinal. Boca Juniors trailing 2-0 to their rivals River Plate. They host the second leg at La Bombonera. It's going to be a wild 90 minutes, maybe more, depending on how it goes in the Libertadores semifinals. Winner goes on to the final. River Plate trying to defend their title. Boca desperately trying to get to a Libertadores final for the first time in a little while. So Soccer Over There will be 6 o'clock from the Brew House. We'll talk about everything from Europe, but then lead into a preview of Boca and River. We'll also talk a little bit about the MLS playoffs, I'm assuming. Just a little bit.
I've heard of those.
You know it happens. Let's get into the news and notes a little bit first here, John, because there's a bunch of different things that happened over the weekend. Let's start with our friends up I-85 in Greenville. The Triumph went out to Frisco and I thought played really well and had chances. They just could not find a goal in the League One final, and North Texas lifts the trophy.
Yeah, and watch that, and watch that from beginning to end, and there were opportunities for Greenville to put the ball in the back of the net, and they just couldn't do it. I remember I think Carlos Gomez had a couple, and there was some from, I think Tyler Pollock had an opportunity. But the one thing that I noticed, and let me go to Chris Ashley here and just let you hear what he wrote. He says he knows that most of Overreaction Monday will be heavy Atlanta United and MLS playoff focused, but I couldn't miss the opportunity to say once again how proud I am to be a fan of the Greenville Triumph. They fought valiantly in Frisco, and I think will come back stronger next season. And one of the things that I also noticed on various accounts was, whether it was Chris Lewis from the front office or John Harkes, it's just that, yes, while they had the medals and they got the finalist plate, just the smiles that everybody had about what they were able to accomplish after a slow start, and guys who, it was a veteran side trying to get into the swing of things, and once they finally did find their rhythm, they made that run up the standings and made it to the last game of the year. But we'll be catching up with folks later this week. But it was a great run by Greenville, and just that one chance that North Texas did, and they put it in the back of the net.
Yeah, North Texas did enough to get the job done here. Really good first season for League One. I think they identified the need at the USL office for this level that for them was more than the Summer League that was the former PDL, now is League Two. And for markets and ownership groups that maybe either wanted to grow into a USL championship team, because I think we'll see that happen over time, but also ones that are in some smaller markets, and maybe it's not a natural USL championship market, and a level that is a little bit below in terms of expenditure. One doesn't have to be a level below in terms of quality. And right. I think that's something that really showed out this season. Like, yes, over 100 games, when you have one team that is spending a lot more than another, then of course you're going to see that difference. But the quality with players who are getting opportunities in League One that just weren't there before. You're seeing players, whether it's North Texas, who is developing a lot of young players who didn't have opportunities to get professional minutes before in the Dallas organization, or if it's Greenville, players who have been at a higher level, players who have been in MLS, players who have been in USL Championship, but come down to this level and lift up younger guys, but also get a chance to extend their career and be in a market and be those leaders at this level. You know, that's very important too. So it's been a great first season. I think it's a great launching pad for League One and Division III professional soccer that was needed, and I think they're going about it the right way, and I think you're going to see a good bit of stability, even though the Lansing situation is a black eye, and it's something that you don't want to see happen where teams come and go. But I don't think that's going to happen very often, and especially once you figure out, okay, where did we go wrong here with this?
Yeah.
I don't think it's something that'll be repeated.
And, you know, what we've done at SDH is we've followed the Tormenta story from absolute beginnings, and you're seeing what Darren Van Tassel and Nitra Van Tassel and what they're doing with their family environment coming out of Statesboro, Georgia, and to see stories like a Statesboro and like you were saying, and it doesn't matter the size of the market. And it's been fun to see how USL League One has developed in this first season, and I'm looking forward to the addition of the Revs and Inter Miami and the folks in Omaha as well, and seeing. And I know that there's the ideas of resurrecting Penn FC and Rochester as well, and there's some good soccer markets, and I think that. You know, when they continue to add and strengthen, I'm looking forward to seeing where those next steps are.
Yeah, and I think we'll start to hear more and more about it. We know the three that are coming in for sure with Omaha, New England, and Inter Miami in League One. I think you'll see more a club like Asheville City that is coming into League Two from the NPSL, and with the idea that if things continue to progress, that they'll go professional. And League One would be that next step. I think you'll see more League Two teams that decide to go year-round and go into League One over time as well. Let's talk NWSL. We have a final coming up now on October 27th in Cary, North Carolina. The home team's in it. North Carolina Courage get back to the final. It took extra time. It felt like one of those games where maybe the Courage have so many chances, can't find the back of the net, something goes wrong on the other end, and they lose it. But they took care of business in extra time, and 4-1 win for North Carolina. Once they got the first, it kind of felt like, okay, they're going to be all right here.
It did.
And ultimately they were, although Seattle, well, the Reign did get it to 1-1, but it was momentary because then Debinha with a beautiful free kick to take it to 2-1, and then second half of extra time, it's all over. So Courage go through, not a surprise there. The other home team in the semifinals goes through. Maybe a little bit of a surprise if you haven't been paying close attention. The Chicago Red Stars have been very good this season, 14-8-2 overall. Portland has not been as good as they have been in the past, 11-6-7. The World Cup players being away, I think, had a huge impact on the Thorn season. People thought, well, they'll be able to dial it back up going into the postseason. It was a 1-0 win for the Red Stars. Sam Kerr with a goal in the 8th minute. They make it hold up, and for the first time in a little while, the Red Stars it's the first time for them in a final. Sorry. I think they might have been to finals in previous iterations in other leagues because the Red Stars have a pretty long history. But it's their first time in the NWSL final.
And good for Chicago to get to the last game of the year, and seeing the Courage head to, once again, the last game of the year in the NWSL. And I know that probably once the season is over, everybody will kind of step back and kind of understand what the Courage have been able to accomplish over the last handful of years. And it's just been truly amazing stuff as the standard bearer for the NWSL, what they've been able to do. And we know it's a swan song for some folks for the Courage in the championship game, but once again, when it comes to the NWSL, we've heard some things that are supposedly going to be announced later this week with Louisville and possibly with Sacramento down the line. I'm looking forward to the next steps of the NWSL as well, and you're hoping that the franchises that are being brought in are coming in and they're being just as solid as what we see in Carolina.
Yeah, that's the next item on the list is Louisville. An announcement is expected on Tuesday. Are expected to be joining the NWSL for the 2021 season. And, of course, we're all assuming that it's attached to Louisville City and the USL Championship and the new stadium being built. Louisville is the market and the club that Amanda Duffy came from before she joined the NWSL front office. They get the expansion bid here. Cincinnati has said that they want to come in when their stadium is ready. Sacramento has been mentioned with the possibility of coming in next year. Sacramento is a little bit busy at the moment, and that's why it's kind of interesting that they might be looking at NWSL for 2020 because there's an announcement expected to come at 2:30 today that they will be joining Major League Soccer, and I think the assumption is for the 2022 season. Could be 21 because you want somebody to come in with Austin, but 2022 has been the assumption for the Sacramento Republic. Maybe they get a jump on everything with the NWSL team starting first.
And with all of the talk that we've had with Sacramento over the last handful of years, aren't they ownership group, ownership size, ownership stability to finally have all of the I's dotted and T's crossed? They've been a tremendous market with the Republic in the USL Championship, and we've seen the schematics and we've seen all the plans for the new stadium that they're looking to do. One of the numbers that I'm interested in hearing about is the initial size and if they can expand from whatever that initial size is, because you and I have had the discussion, and Jarrett and Nick have been a part of it too on the other shows about size and not wanting to sell yourself short and making sure that you can expand into what MLS is these days. So I think I've heard low to mid 20s, and I just want to know if the stadium in whatever form or size it's going to be can be expanded to meet what's going on in currently what we're seeing with MLS.
Other stuff around the country, Luke Sassano, the technical director for Cincinnati, is expected to step down, according to a report from The Athletic. Sam Stejskal, Jeff Reuter. It's also been confirmed by folks on the ground in Cincinnati. Due to family reasons has been the explanation. From an FC Cincinnati perspective, that takes everyone who is involved in building this roster out of the picture going into year two, which is a little surprising that that's where you're at. It's also a little surprising that it's happening now because there's a lot of decisions to be made. And if it's just that Gerard Nijkamp and Ron Jans are going to be making all those decisions, so that's all that matters, then okay, fine. But yeah, this is an awkward situation, I think, in Cincinnati, that it's just been such a wasted opportunity in year one. And they're looking at it kind of like Minnesota did. They want to be at their best and be peaking when they move into their new stadium. I do understand the logic and the reasoning behind that. I don't think that means that you have to make bad decisions in year one, as both teams have done. Maybe you're not going to spend as much. Maybe you're going to be a little more frugal. That's understandable. You're building a stadium, but you still can make good decisions on your roster.
Yes.
And there's no reason why that can't be the case, even if you have spending limitations. Cincinnati failed in that regard. Miami, you don't expect them to be frugal or fail in that regard. Nashville, building a stadium, different situation. They've got to make the right decisions in building their roster and they have the blueprint not to follow now with Cincinnati and Minnesota.
Yes. Yeah. I like how you phrased that. The blueprint not to follow. And yeah, so right now with the Cincinnati purge happening, I want to see what I guess FCC 2.0 is going to look like now, because I remember what we were looking like with Minnesota United and the Scandinavian variant that did not go well at all. And we've seen them take that and turn it, and now they're in the playoffs. And now I want to see how Cincinnati does things with Sassoni now stepping away and that whole front office troika now out the door.
Reports out of AS in Spain have Zlatan Ibrahimovic open to Serie A offers in January. Can't say I'm surprised. I mean,
no.
He has come here and played better than anyone expected, and if people thought that he would be doing this, I don't think you're being true to yourself, because you got to remember he was coming off of a knee injury that basically ruled him out at Manchester United. Now, maybe they would have liked to have had him over these last 2 seasons. I think he probably would have been quite helpful. Maybe they got away from that one a little too early, but he's come here and shown that he can still play at a high level. Can he withstand the physical challenge of playing in Italy or another top league? Because he's talked about wanting to test himself at the highest level again. Who knows? Hard to tell. Maybe, maybe not. But that's what's out there. So if you're looking at it from an LA Galaxy perspective, you might be building in a different way starting in 2020. And I do feel like they can build a more coherent plan and a more coherent strategy without that focal point of Zlatan up top, where you almost get tunnel vision of, okay, feed number 9, no matter what, he'll score. It doesn't matter. Just feed him. Just keep putting the ball into him. Sometimes to the detriment of playing better soccer without him.
No, and it's a point that we've made, that we've thought that the Galaxy, A, are better, and B, now possibly, maybe, will be better when he's not there, because it's more of a team-based effort. We've seen the relationship that Christian Pavón has been able to strike up with Zlatan, and you have Jonah Dos Santos, and there are pieces, but I've been of the thought pattern that once you're not as reliant on someone that is a force in MLS like Zlatan can be, that I think that Guillermo Barros Escaloso is going to put the team together, and I use that word, put the team together on the pitch that he wants to have. And so any offers for Zlatan do not surprise me one way or the other.
Looks like the Chicago Fire are going to keep the name, but according to the Chicago Sun-Times, they are going to refresh some of the branding, and the logo could be part of that. I'm fine with that. I think there's been a little bit of a reaction to even changing anything when it comes to the logo. It's a great badge, but I don't know if it's an untouchable badge. I think changing the name would have been a mistake, but changing branding around it is okay.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. You know, do you go with more something Red Star-ish with the Chicago flag or something like that? But I think that as much as I love the look of the Chicago Fire Department and the CFD crest, it's probably time for a refresh. And now they're going to be paying someone, I'm fairly certain, a pretty penny to come up with their new building.
Yeah, they're going to have to do it quickly because kickoff will be in February in the new building, so we'll see how that
wow.
goes. Yeah, I mean, that's when the season starts, so they've known this. I know.
Didn't the season just start, and now we're already in October, and the season's going to start in February?
Open Cup for 2020 has already started. We just had the second round of local qualifiers. The Florida Soccer Soldiers were knocked out. They will not be making another run into the tournament proper. Christos FC is still alive. North Texas Rayados still alive. Nashville United, a club that's been around for a long time up in the Music City, they are still alive. the Georgia Revolution reserves, they were supposed to play Soda City FC in Columbia, South Carolina. That was postponed. It was supposed to be on Saturday. Rescheduled date has not been announced yet. I know they were looking at this upcoming weekend. Have not seen any movement from either of the clubs involved or from U.S. Soccer. The third round of local qualifiers, I think the matchups are going to be announced here pretty soon. That is either the last round in some regions or there's one more round after that to go into the tournament proper. And there was all kinds of talk earlier in the year about the tournament being different, starting earlier, things moving around. I don't know exactly how many local qualifiers are going to get in, what the numbers are going to look like in the other leagues, because if they started earlier, it's going to be basically impossible for most of the NPSL and USL League 2 teams to participate because their rosters don't actually come together until May, because you're dealing with college players who are coming in after the college spring season and after their college classes end. So if they try to have them play in April, they're almost going to have a second type of squad. They're going to have a secondary group that they normally wouldn't be recruiting from, and not every club is built to be able to do that. So there's a lot of questions about what the Open Cup looks like. We know the Florida Soccer Soldiers won't be in it. We're waiting to see who else is, and once we know about a day time for that Georgia Revolution reserves match, we'll give you a heads up. It's going to be in Columbia, South Carolina against Soda City. Just don't know when.
And we've had discussions in the past about teams from the NPSL going deep in competitions. Now we're having discussions about NPSL teams and teams of those start times now having problems on the front end of the schedules. So you're hoping that something like this gets sorted out so you can have proper representation from those kinds of teams, which really make the Open Cup special in and of itself. And you just hope that it doesn't get soiled, I guess, for lack of a better word, when it comes to their participation by trying to start things too soon, to where you'd have to come up with that quote-unquote second side to get things squared away.
Well, I disagree, though. I mean, if you're going to have these teams participate in the tournament, they have to be able to participate in the tournament. And we've been talking about wanting to see MLS teams in the tournament earlier and have more games to play in it. Well, you only have so many dates, and it's very difficult to make it all fit. So,
yeah,
I mean, if you're going to be an NPSL team or a USL League 2 team and you want to play in the Open Cup, that's just part of the situation. Is if it's going to be earlier, you have to be ready to deal with that.
And then how do you address the player availability situation, knowing what the player pools are?
You go get other players. It's that simple. You go get other players. You go get other amateur players. You go sign other players to play. That's part of the gig. I mean, so the other way would be to keep the tournament as it is. Don't give the MLS teams any extra games, and just keep it super condensed in the time frame that it is, because that's what's best for the amateur teams who hardly ever get past the round of 16.
Right.
For a specific subset of the amateur teams, by the way. Because Christos, because Florida Soccer Soldiers, because North Texas Rayados, who are teams who have been getting deeper into the tournament, are not built that way. They're built like amateur teams. They are amateur teams that play year-round.
Right.
The NPSL and League 2 teams that aren't built that way, I don't think they should be the ones driving the way that the tournament is structured.
And that, I guess, is where I was trying to come up with the delineation of things, because of the amateur sides like we were talking about versus the NPSL sides that don't get their season started and don't get their player gathering and development started until a certain point. So that was, I guess, where I was trying to come up with the delineation of bringing in players and trying to figure out, okay, amateur sides don't have the same worries of NPSL sides, but it does turn out to be the amateur sides are the ones that make those deeper dives.
The NPSL and League 2 sides,
kind of stuff.
Yes, the other ones they're amateur teams. They just build their rosters on college players. And if you want to play in the Open Cup, you're not going to be able to do that, just flat out. So if you want to be in the Open Cup and you want these opportunities, well, then you have to have another way of building a roster and go from there. If you're a summer league team, you're a summer league team. And if you're a summer league team, maybe you're not a team that plays in the Open Cup. And that's okay, too. That's completely fine, too. I mean, look at what Georgia Revolution's doing, for example. Georgia Revolution has a team that is branded as the reserves that plays in the ADASL, that plays year-round. Some of those players play on the NPSL team that is branded as the Georgia Revolution. But by being in the ADASL and entering the tournament, they're able to play in the Open Cup. They didn't qualify through NPSL play, but they qualified by entering the tournament as a regular amateur team. So they're called the reserves, but they're not really that different because they have a lot of players who play both. They do add some college players to their NPSL team because they can, but they have a squad that plays year-round. If you want to be a team that plays in the Open Cup, that's the way you should do it. If you want to be a summer league team, be a summer league team and be a college development team. And there's a spot for that. That it doesn't diminish you. It's just you can't be in the Open Cup that way if you're going to start playing in April or March.
Yeah.
You just can't. So it's not even a different – I feel like it's a whole different thing entirely. Because if you're a summer league team, you're not a year-round team. The Open Cup is about year-round teams. It should be. And I think that's where it's headed.
Okay. I just wanted to see where you were coming from there.
All right, let's get into a quick break. We'll come back and we'll talk about the other games in MLS, but then we'll also wrap up with your reactions to the week. All of the MLS, all of the NWSL, USL League One, Open Cup thoughts, Atlanta United thoughts, whatever you want to get into, tweet at us at Soccer Down Here, and we'll get into it. But we're going to take a quick break right here. Be right back after this.
Looking for future leaders we can trust and believe in? Look no further than the high school student athletes right here in Georgia. High school sports teach young people how to be effective leaders. It begins by making their grades and being on time for practice. It includes learning to listen, following directions, accepting responsibility, being a good role model. And it's about respect for officials, opponents, the rules, and each other. The result? It transcends sports. It gives us hope for the future. High school sports. There's so much more than just a game. This message presented by the Georgia High School Association and the Georgia Athletic Directors Association.
Today's show is presented by Appolinsky & Associates, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience, supporters of Atlanta United, Faction, and Inter-Atlanta Youth Football Club. If you've been hurt in a wreck, contact Steve today at steve@aa-legal.com or call in 24/7 at 404-377-9191. The initial consultation is free.
We know that every driver is different, and a one-size policy does not fit all. That's why Country Financial offers a variety of discounts, so you get the coverage you need and the savings you deserve. From good driver to good student, multi-policy to multi-car, we've got a discount to suit every driver. Call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871 today to see what you could save. On Facebook at Jason Wright Agency or by phone at 678-568-6871. Discounts vary by state. Policies issued by Country Mutual Insurance Company, Country Preferred Insurance Company, or Country Casualty Insurance Company, Bloomington, Illinois.
Welcome back. Soccer Down Here, October 21st. Get those reactions in on Twitter at Soccer Down Here. What are the people saying, John?
Josh Airy. Historically, we have a pretty good record against Philadelphia. They've never beaten us at home 2-1-0, and Atlanta United has outscored them 7-2, plus 2 red cards in all previous meetings, so I wouldn't put it past this game to be a very physical and high foul match.
Yeah, the red cards weren't like that, though. The red cards that Philadelphia had were
plot losers.
Well, one was. The other one was kind of weird. But both that were descent related. It wasn't about physicality. Philadelphia can be physical. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily categorize them as a physical team. I would think the Red Bulls would be a more physical team than Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia ultimately wants to play, and they want to play at a pretty decent tempo. They want to push the pace a little bit. They do want to press when they're not in possession, but when they get the ball, they want to play. They're not a brute force kind of team. So I think that does lend itself to an advantage from Atlanta United's perspective. You look back at the game at Talon Energy, I thought the first half Atlanta was pretty good, and the wheels came off in the second half because that was game 15 over a 2-month stretch where Philadelphia played 10 in that time frame, and it really started to show.
Yeah.
I thought the legs just came off at the end. First game of the season was at a different point in the season when Atlanta was not at its best and did come back to get a result. That Barco header in the first matchup this season was one of the more underrated goals of the year. It got you a point in that one, a needed point on a day that it just looked like it was one of those that we were seeing a lot early on. It wasn't going to go your way. You rescued something there. That kind of gave you a little bit of momentum. You had the weirdness in Columbus after the international break, and then you started to hit on all cylinders after that. I think Atlanta's a better team than Philadelphia, not just because they finished a little bit higher in the standings. I think they're just a better team than the Philadelphia Union. They have more options. They have to deliver at this point in the season, and they have to control this match. I think Philadelphia has shown the ability to do a lot of the things that Atlanta does in terms of they can control games, they can be the dominant team in the match, but they can also come from behind when they're not. They've maybe shown more of that than Atlanta has this season on the whole. Atlanta needs to get in control of this game because I think Philly is the kind of team that if they get control, it's hard to take it away from them unless they make their own mistakes because they're quality. Atlanta needs to get control early and keep control. And with a Union team that had to battle back against the Red Bulls, how much do they have in the tank to do that again a few days later if Atlanta gets control early? Even if they don't get a goal early, if they get control of it and make Philadelphia have to fight to regain control of this, I just don't know how much Philadelphia will have to do that.
Yeah. Michael Head, while I still do not like this playoff format, I cannot deny that the matches were compelling and exciting, absolute craziness with the weekend's drama. I cannot imagine MLS changing the format going forward. And yes, the yellow on Joseph was absolute BS.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to change it until you get weird things happen the other way with teams getting really defensive. It was surprising to see like how few teams came in with a defensive mindset in this. You had 2 of the only 4 playoff matches in league history that saw both teams score at least 3 goals. Like that had only happened twice before this weekend, and now you get 2 more to add to it. You had Minnesota create a bunch of chances, could not find a goal. I mean, Roman Metzner at right back created 5 chances. Jan Gregers created 4. Christian Pavone created 4 for the Galaxy. They only had 7 that they created all night long. Minnesota created twice that, 14. But just Angelo Rodriguez was not good enough. Darwin Quintero didn't start. Reportedly under the weather. He didn't start the Open Cup final either, so I don't know.
Nope.
The Galaxy got Roman Alessandrini back. He looked good off the bench. First appearance in 6 months. He said, Alessandrini, after the match, talking about LAFC, I'm pretty sure they are afraid of us. I think so because they never beat us, and it's a good opportunity for us to show who owns LA. It's a bold statement, Roman Alessandrini.
Yeah.
According to Rich Hammond of The Athletic in Los Angeles, the get-in-the-door price for the game on Thursday is $226.
Wow.
The get-in-the-door price for Tuesday's Clippers-Lakers game is $105 on the secondary market.
Is that an exhibition game still, or are they in the regular season at that point?
I'm not sure. I wondered if that was an exhibition game. Let's see here if it is or not. No, it's the regular season. It's the first game of the regular season on TNT. So
far out.
Yeah, pretty wild. We'll see where those numbers continue to go. That El Trafico matchup, that could be a very, very expensive ticket if you're trying to get in the door late. The other game out west that we haven't talked about yet, RSL, they outplayed Portland. They were the better team, but they needed a late winner to get through it. Giovanni Savarese wondered where his team was in the first half, but Portland came back into it early. Dairon Asprilla got a header early in the second half. RSL was in control of the first half, but they didn't get a goal until late through Damir Kreilach. Nick Armando was huge in the second half, a number of big saves. But the winner comes from Joao Plata, who only played a little over 300 minutes this season. There was talk that he was going to end up in San Luis in Mexico. It never materialized. He's been coming off the bench. Great run from him. He puts in a dangerous cross. Rusnak dummies it. It might have taken a touch from the defender. And Jefferson Savarino buried it, and that was enough. You could see on the television and on the replays that I think RSL's posted, Kyle Beckerman was back at midfield, and when the ball got past Rusnak and it's fallen to Savarino, he puts his arms up knowing that the goal is coming. It was very cool to see. Diego Valeri was a sub here. He didn't start. Savarese said that he wanted to manage his minutes since he was coming back from a calf injury. He also wanted to go with a lineup that played well on decision day and controlled the game against San Jose. That's going to be a big question during the offseason. I don't think there's any risk of Giovanni Savarese, losing his job in Portland. If he does, I think they'd be crazy, but you're hearing that in New York when it comes to Chris Armas. There's all kinds of talk about Chris Armas losing his job, or he should lose his job, or he will lose his job. That one makes a little more sense. You do have to wonder about the whole situation with Michael Murillo. I think it's hard for me to follow the logic that Reese Buckmaster, who was playing in the USL Championship, is a better option than Michael Murillo, who's an international for Panama and played in the World Cup. I just don't see it. I don't know what the issue is. Murillo has been linked to moves overseas. Maybe the attitude hasn't been there since he didn't get those moves. I don't know. Toronto, DC, we've covered it. I think Toronto was the better team by far. DC with that late equalizer in the 92nd minute, they just didn't have anything going into extra time. Toronto runs them off the field there. Dallas was great. They kept fighting back against Seattle, but Jordan Morris with a hat trick, the first hat trick in Sounders playoff history, and Stephen Fry was big in goal. I don't know if Seattle's going to survive 4-3 games very often, but they did here. Can they do it against RSL? We'll have to wait and see.
Back to the Twitters and Chris Hutchison. FDB gets a 9 from me for his game management and tactical change in the second half with neither Parkhurst or Robinson available. Thanks again, Berhalter. And then he says, who do we put in and what do we do with the back four in Philly? But so he gives FDB a 9 for being a tactician.
Could be a back four, could be a back three, could be one to start and one to finish. I don't know. It's way too early to tell. I just don't think there's an obvious answer here. I really don't. And I think this decision is going to be critical when it comes to who wins on Thursday.
Five Stripe Daily comes in this morning. My initial thought when Miles went down was that having Parkhurst through the playoffs was a blessing in disguise. I think losing the captain may be an even bigger loss. However, the style and composure of the win was exactly what we needed. So glad it wasn't crazy for my heart.
Yeah, it was tense. It wasn't crazy. It was different. It was different than a lot of the games around the league. So it didn't feel like one that I was freaking out about New England finding a bunch of goals. It felt like one that Atlanta might not find a goal. And it felt like it might go extra time and penalties. I just didn't see Atlanta losing it unless something weird happened. I didn't think New England was doing enough to threaten Atlanta, but they were doing enough defensively until the change up to the 4-2-3-1 I think they were doing enough to keep Atlanta off the board. Now, New England's probably best moment in the game was that first 15 minutes or maybe after the first minute or two of the second half where they kind of grabbed control and were going into the ascendancy a bit. The sub changed it completely. Even when New England was starting to look good, I didn't feel like they were getting close to an obvious goal. I never quite got that sense out of them. They're just a limited team. I mean, they finished 7th in the Eastern Conference for a reason. They didn't have a ton of different options here to give Bruce Arena many solutions. I thought Bruce got everything he possibly could get out of this group. I mean, he lost 4 games with the New England Revolution in MLS play. 4. 2 of them were to Atlanta. 1 was to NYC, and 1 was to LAFC, the best 3 teams in the league. So
yeah,
can't really complain too much on the New England side, and I think they're looking forward to next year. And Atlanta did enough and got the clean sheet, the only one to do it, and they move on.
Four-Card Ahmed brings in a name that we haven't talked about this morning yet. He says, I'm really worried about LGP's composure. I was sure he was getting to yellows Saturday, and he and Gazan were too concerned with the side AR. I think Mo Adams is probably the left back on Thursday.
Mo Adams has never played left back. That's one problem. He played a left wing back against LAFC for 45 minutes, and it didn't really go that well. So,
no.
I don't know about that one. He's never played left back, though. That's something to keep in mind. The AR, there was one incident where that happened, and I thought it was an overreaction from Gazan and LGP about a delayed flag going up for offside. It was, I thought, obvious that it was offside. That's not the reasoning here. That's not what affects your thought process if you're the AR there. You are instructed to delay it. This is coming from Pro and their assistant referees' specific website. Where you delay it, and this is coming from IFAB, from FIFA, internationally, this is consistent. Delay the raising of the flag when tight offside offense is identified, and these are the things you're looking for to delay it, where there is a very clear attacking situation, or a player is about to score, or has a clear run towards the opponent's penalty area. And that was the case. It was right on top of the 18. It was outside of it. It was in the final third, but they're going into the penalty area. So the AR did exactly what he's supposed to do. Is it, something that's great in that situation? If you're a defender, no, because you have to play it out, but you have to play it out. And honestly, if you go back to the way it was before, the AR puts his flag up, the ref doesn't have to immediately blow the whistle. That's something I think we lose at times. The flag doesn't stop the play. The AR is not calling it. The AR is saying that he thinks there is an offside offense. The referee makes that decision. And now, with the referee having the backup of VAR, they want to make sure they're getting it right. So, yeah, it was an overreaction from Gazan and Gonzalez-Perez. I don't think it had anything to do with LGP's eventual yellow. I thought that was actually a little quick. And I think it's reputation. And that's something you have to think about when you're getting into this, because now your only concern when it comes to accumulation, and man, we spend a lot of time worrying about accumulation. Your only concern is your players who are on a yellow right now, because if they get a yellow in the upcoming match and Atlanta wins, they would be out for the Eastern Conference Final. Once you get to the Eastern Conference Final, yellow card accumulation is wiped out. You're not going to be suspended for accumulation going into MLS Cup. So it's your players that are on a yellow right now, Jeff Lorenowitz, Leandro Gonzalez-Perez, Joseph Martinez. If they get a yellow against Philadelphia and Atlanta wins, then they will miss the Eastern Conference Final. And in the case of Lorenowitz and Gonzalez-Perez, it's definitely a concern. You got to win first. You got to advance. And you hope that they're careful enough. You hope they're not put in a situation where they have to make that decision. But you got to win first. That's just where you're at.
Daniel Price, his man of the match was Jeff Lorenowitz.
Jeff Lorenowitz was very good. You said that like you were surprised.
No, I'm just saying that Daniel Price said, man of the match, Jeff Larentowicz, stellar performance.
Yeah, he was very good. I mean, I think Ezequiel Barco was outstanding. I thought Franco Escobar was outstanding both defensively and going forward, and that's why he was our man of the match on the radio broadcast. Barco was the highest rated player when you look at who scored in their algorithm. He had the assist, and it was a beautiful assist. I thought Barco was hugely influential in this, as was Jeff Larentowicz. I thought he really gave you a strong performance as you needed in front of the back line. There were a lot of good performances in this.
Unite Chop Rise once again brings up Mikey Ambrose being a part of the 18, if not the 11, on Thursday, because he is a back, as Unite Chop Rise reminds us.
He's a left back. I mean, he's a left back who lately for Atlanta United 2 has also been playing some left center back when they've played 3 in the back. So he's been playing well. He picked up 11 starts for Atlanta United 2 when he returned from injury, and a lot of those over the last few months. Now, he's been training with the first team. He hasn't played for the first team. He's been in the 18 a few times. It's not an ideal situation, but he's a player that I think it's easy to forget how influential he was last year before he was hurt when Greg Garza was injured. He had a number of good performances in the middle of the season last year, and if you have to turn to him, I think you can count on him. I mean, Tata Martino called him a Boy Scout. He was always prepared. You might need him. You might need that Boy Scout in this one. I think he's in the 18. I'd be shocked if he's not in the 18.
Yeah. Percy Herrera has a question. Could Tyreek Hill coming to our game be a peek into MLS 4.0? Elite athletes not playing for hometown teams and aren't in town to play hometown teams, going out of their way to watch a match.
It's not completely out of the blue here because Tyreek Hill is a guy who played in high school at Coffee High School down in South Georgia, but still in the state of Georgia. No connection directly to Atlanta outside of going to high school in the state of Georgia. So does he have a home here? It's possible. I don't know. It's possible. I don't know if he randomly said, I'm going to go see an MLS game this weekend. Which one am I going to go see? Okay, I'm going to go to Atlanta. I don't think it's quite that random, but I think you're already starting to see it in general, and I don't think it has to be players who are not related to that city for it to be a big deal. I think you're seeing it here. Trae Young, huge Atlanta United fan. John Collins, huge Atlanta United fan. The Hawks players are at Atlanta United games as much as they can be in the summertime. I don't know from a Braves-Falcons perspective how much, although you do get, Ender Inciarte, obviously great friends with Joseph Martinez. I'm sure he's in the building quite often. You're getting more and more of that. James Harden buying into the Dynamo. I think, honestly, that could be part of MLS 4.0, where it's not just going to games, but becoming part of ownership groups and becoming key figures in the soccer team's growth in that market. That's a very cool thing to start to see more and more of. I think it's just we're used to seeing superstars on the front row at an NBA game. You're used to seeing people in the box at an NFL game or at a baseball game. Now it's becoming more and more common to see celebrities, other athletes at MLS games. And it has to continue because that's just part of being cool. It's part of the cool factor. So more and more, it's very cool.
Mr. Fantastic, he wanted to know about the discussions that LGP and Gazan were having with the ARs, and we already went into that. Chandler Creel, do we have confirmation that Nashville SC will move over from the west to the east when Austin and possibly Sacramento join the league?
We don't know if they're in the west to start. So, no, we have no confirmation on nothing. We'll have to wait and see. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work. I don't think there's any guarantee Nashville's in the west to start, first off. I could see Chicago going to the west to start and staying in the west. So, I don't know. We'll wait and see.
Eichmann with a thought for the morning. The LA Galaxy are going to win, and Alessandrini's going to be the hero. He looked good and was playing angry. Hashtag Overreaction Monday.
That's a big thought based off looking good and playing angry that they're going to win. They shouldn't. They're not the better team. I mean, it's not even close. LAFC is a far better team than the LA Galaxy, but they've never been able to keep their heads in an El Tráfico match. So how much does that play into it? If they're ever going to be able to keep their focus, it should be in a postseason game. We'll find out. The bigger question from the LAFC side is Mark Anthony Kaye and Walker Zimmerman. Kaye left the U.S.-Canada match with a hamstring injury. It didn't look good at all. Haven't heard an update. Walker Zimmerman left on decision day with a head injury. It looked really bad. Haven't heard an update. So if they're not available, LAFC is far more limited with their options because they just don't have the same depth in either position, even worse at center back. You're going to be turning to either Tristan Blackman, who played some at center back, mostly on the outside. You're going to be turning to Danilo Silva. You're going to be turning to Dejan Jakovic. You know, guys who only started a couple games this season. It's difficult. So that's the bigger issue for me as opposed to Alessandrini. I don't know if Alessandrini starts. It's probably a pretty big risk to do that when you have both Pavón and Antuna, who have played well. And you have Fabio Alvarez, who has played well this season at times, too. So I don't think it's an obvious one that Alessandrini starts. I think the bigger questions are what LAFC has available.
Matt Wagner had an interesting question, and it has to do with the 18 this week. And he wanted to know about the possibility of having Atlanta United 2 players involved in the 18.
Nope.
If so, who?
Nope. No, there's no if so, because you can't have Atlanta United 2 players involved in the 18. Now, Matt might be asking about players who have played with Atlanta United 2 but are on Atlanta United contracts, and that you can. But your only possibilities there are Mikey Ambrose, who we've talked about, Mo Adams, who we've talked about, who's also been on first-team rosters quite a bit, Luis Fernando, who we have not seen at the MLS level yet, and I don't think that's going to happen here.
Right.
Homegrowns like Bello, who's not here. He's with the U17 national team at the U17 World Cup. Andrew Carlton, who we haven't seen lately. He had an injury at the very end of the season, and we haven't seen him here in a little while, so I'm not expecting that. Chris Goslin's been injured and hasn't played most of the season. Patrick Okonkwo would be forward depth that you don't need. So, I mean, your only option, honestly, is Ambrose, who is a first-team player, and I would consider him a first-team player anyway. You can't sign guys on USL contracts to play in MLS.
Steve, and I'm probably going to mess this up, because Steve's got a couple of consonants in the middle of the last name, so I'm just going to say Steve Doinek. Says, with Atlanta United's injuries that we have, I feel like we're playing with house money. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I kind of do. I mean, it makes this game more of a toss-up. I would feel like if both teams are coming in at full strength, then Atlanta would be the favorite and they should win. Now, I still think Atlanta's the better team, but I don't think it's clear-cut. So it kind of feels like a toss-up kind of game. And in a toss-up game, hey, honestly, I like Atlanta's chances. They've just been here more often. I mean, Philadelphia got their first playoff win in club history. You know, Philadelphia didn't win the Open Cup. Philadelphia hasn't played in the Campeones Cup. They haven't won an MLS Cup. You got a bunch of Atlanta United players who I think are comfortable in this situation, dealing with the pressure of it. And you've got a Philadelphia team that maybe isn't. And if Philadelphia is missing Alejandro Bedoya, that's the heartbeat of your team ripped out. So I think Atlanta's still the favorite. But yeah, it does create some of that unknown. And, you know, you're not looking for excuses going in, but if you're missing Miles Robinson and Michael Parkhurst and you're turning to a back line that maybe, if you replicate what you did against Club America, started one game together, and probably I think you're going to go in a different direction, that's just me, then you're going to be starting a back line in a conference semifinal that hasn't played together all season. at least to start. So it's kind of hard to have this, demanding expectation that win or nothing else is acceptable here. It kind of gives you that playing with house money vibe a little bit, doesn't it?
Eichmann wants to know if we know who the center ref is yet, and if we don't, I guess when would we know?
Could be announced today. I don't know. I don't know what their timeline is. Pro's not always consistent when you get to this. Today, I'd say tomorrow at the latest, but they have not announced it. I just checked it.
Lewis Martin, when discussing El Tráfico, he says El Tráfico in the new Rams stadium with 100,000 folks will happen in a few years. This is good for MLS.
Maybe. It could. I mean, you're going to have to figure some things out, and somebody's going to have to either give up a home game or do whatever. I think it could be awesome. So we'll see if that happens down the road. Finishing up here, because I am out the door here in just a couple of minutes. Eichmann clarified on Alessandrini, thinks that he comes off the bench and hits a late winner. It's possible. I think there's other players you're looking at when it comes to the Galaxy, and it probably starts and ends with Zlatan and with Pavone as the other one. That I think if they win, it's going to be those two who deliver it. Ike also asked about an update on Adama Diomande. There has been an update. He's back. It was announced on Friday that he is back with LAFC. He has been taken off of the, I don't know what list they call it, if there's a list. In the NFL, they call it the physically unable to perform list quite often. I don't know what you'd call it here, but he is cleared to play in competition, and that will start with the postseason. Don't know about training. Don't know if he's been training. Don't know where he's at in that regard, but he's able to play in El Tráfico.
Let's see, Jorge B. says that Felipe Cardenas quoted Frank de Boer regarding the final minutes of the game down a man. He says it was nerve-wracking and not good for the heart. I completely agree with him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the final 2 minutes of stoppage time when Parkhurst was out, yeah, 100%. That was a mess. But that's just where you were at that point.
And I guess I should be pleased that I'm helping Daniel Price with his migraine with my voice.
Okay. That's good.
Yeah. But so Eichmann agreed with Daniel about man of the match. And are we doing the 45 or are we doing the 72 on Thursday? Are we doing the short stadium or the big one?
I have no idea. I saw Shiva's post saying that it wasn't open all the way, but I have not seen any announcement or anything about it, so I'm not sure.
Well, and we just hit officially being caught up just in time.
Perfect timing, because I need to get out the door. I'm going to be going up to the Children's Healthcare of Atlanta training ground to get some interviews. Maybe first team stuff, but there's plenty of people who do that. I'm going to go and get some interviews with Stephen Glass and some of the Atlanta United 2 figures who had a big role in making that team very difficult to beat at the end of the season. They went up to Nashville on Saturday night with, I think, 4 academy players in the 16, and all of them played. 3 of them started because of injuries and suspensions. You had a bunch of yellow card accumulation all happen at the same time, and 3 of your potential center backs were all out for this one. So you started Garrison Tubbs, an academy player, and Jack Metcalf, who's played everywhere. I think he hadn't played center back. He added that one to the list.
Except goal.
I said almost everywhere. He hasn't played goalkeeper. He hasn't played forward, and he hadn't played center back going into this one. But he did on Saturday. They lost 3-0 to a Nashville team that is very good in the USL Championship this season. That doesn't diminish anything that the team accomplished in the last couple months of the year. They were 8 straight undefeated going into that one. Really good finish to the season from Stephen Glass and crew, and we'll be putting together a final end of the year 2's review with some interviews that I'll be catching here in about a half hour, however long it takes me to get up to Marietta. So thanks everybody for jumping in on a earlier Overreaction Monday. We'll be back tomorrow at the normal time, 9 a.m., for Tuesday Thoughts. No soccer over there tonight. That'll be tomorrow as we get ready for the Copa Libertadores semifinal between Boca and River. You can come join us at the Brew House for the show or to hang out and watch the game with us. Going to be a fun one. We will see you then, and we'll talk to you in the morning. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata.